Hey everybody, welcome to today's edition of the Media Buyer webinar. If you're just joining today, my name is Brian. I'm the head of growth here at Northbeam, and then we have Tyler, who's head of strategy. Today in our Media Buyer newsletter, we're going to be reviewing media buying data across industries, metrics, and benchmarks. If this is your first time here, this is really a weather report of what's happening across all the major ad platforms in terms of your big key metrics like CPM, CTR, CPCs, etc. Also that you can make smarter decisions faster. Listen, thanks for joining today, Tyler. I know it's your first time on the webinar. I know it's only our second one, but hopefully you'll be a repeat guest here. Anybody in the audience who knows Tyler, has been in a call with Tyler, knows that he really knows his stuff. So we're excited to have you here today, Tyler.
Awesome, excited to be here.
All right, let's just get right into it. So first things first, if you're looking at ROAS, you can clearly see TikTok ROAS is down pretty significantly month over month. YouTube ROAS continues to grow. We've seen this trend continuing over the last couple of weeks. It's not stopping now. If you look at cost per click is down on Pinterest. That continues. We've been talking about Pinterest a lot, both in our newsletter and on this webinar. I think we're going to continue doing that. They keep running updates, they keep changing things, adding new things to the algorithm, new ad placements. And if you look over at CPM, CPMs are up as a result of that, right? Across Pinterest, CPMs are up on TikTok, down a little bit on Meta, just like ROAS is down as well on Meta, which we're going to talk about that later. I'm sure many of you may have noticed Instagram shops turned off this week. So, things like that are affecting ad spend all across the board. Major things that I find on here are the rise in YouTube CPMs. There's been a lot of conversation about the upcoming TikTok ban. There's been a lot of conversation about YouTube Shorts, people trying to master that, creators bouncing around between the platforms, trying to figure out what the next step is, right? But we're going to deep dive into all of these starting now. So other things we have going on, we have big month over month data. There's a lot here, can't cover it all. Go download our most recent issue of the Media Buyer if you want to read more about this. I think the biggest call outs for me on here are click-through rates on YouTube. You can clearly see up almost 11%, almost 12 there going on it. Conversion rate is way up on YouTube as well. And the budget share, which I know is something that a lot of people ask a lot about, both on an industry level and on a macro level. Budget share, watching Google go down, watching Pinterest stay almost flat, watching YouTube budget share actually go down, while performance goes down or up, depending on what you're looking at, is like kind of amazing. So there's a lot here to cover, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So we're just going to get right into it, and we'll start over here. So Tyler, the first thing I want to talk about today is Meta. This Meta, Facebook. What are you seeing here? What's going on right now? Where are brands in terms of what they're doing on Meta? What are you seeing when you're talking to clients?
Yeah, well, I think when we look month over month, one of the big dynamics that's changing right now is obviously February, we had these two big holidays, right? We had Valentine's Day, we had President's Day. It makes that period a very search heavy month. And therefore, advertisers coming into March now having to rebuild that funnel, right? And so I think that's a big part of what we're seeing is, and I think we were seeing that on the other side, just huge drop-offs, right, in spend on Google. And that was one of the biggest things I noticed specifically in search. And so I think that's a big part of the dynamic that we're seeing now. And so as advertisers are pushing back into Meta, they're looking for better ways to get efficiency, right? And I think ASC is a big campaign type that still has a lot of people have eyes on. We actually, we sent out some data about a month or two ago that showed that there's still relatively low penetration in ASC, but that's one of the better campaign types in terms of CPM, CPC efficiency. So I think that's one of the big things that advertisers should be focused on now is thinking about how to better crack that strategy on ASC.
We're kind of in the you mentioned holidays. We're kind of in the in-between season, right here, as Ryan mentioned last week. Yeah. What's a good thing for brands to do when you're in between these two big seasons, right? Where everybody's going to be advertising on whether it's Valentine's Day or, we have Father's Day coming up in the distance, whatever is going on, right? What do you do in the in-between seasons in general? And what should we be doing right now besides learning to crack ASC?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things I like to keep an eye on when just seasons change, right? When you're coming out of especially like big holiday periods, and we're going into a stretch where there aren't really those same tent poles. The biggest thing is just really changing of the season and changing of weather, which if you're a brand, especially in food and bev, and there are considerations to which products sell better in this time of season, but many apparel brands, that's the same, right? We see this transition in what type of, which of your product lines are selling most at this time of the year. I'd be looking back last year and saying, okay, looking at my data and saying, okay, when are we expecting these peaks and changes in which of our product lines are selling most efficiently, and try to anticipate that rather than waiting for the algorithm to catch up, especially in formats like Google Shopping. That's somewhere where just to be aware of, if you have product groups split out and you're not leveraging fully automated bidding on Google Shopping, maybe there's some manual intervention there, but particularly on Facebook as well, and your social platforms, thinking about, okay, which ads am I featuring? Looking back at my creative analyses from this time last year and seeing, okay, what time did certain either product lines or certain type of ads pop? Try to anticipate that, right? Everybody has different distribution in terms of where their customer is, but especially if you have a large contingent of customers in warmer climates, like that, this seasonal change is already happening. So I'd be thinking about that. The other big area that I would be focused on ahead of the end of the month is, I always think about this upon end of the quarter. End of the quarter is when we tend to see generally CPMs will increase as a lot of larger brands are trying to push through to potential like top of line targets. That's going to be, I would say, a little less prevalent than in prior years, just due to interest rate climbs. I'd say there's probably a little bit less, grow at top line at the stake of profitability, but this will be a really good example, and we'll kind of see how that CPM pressure applies towards end of the quarter here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think if you have stuff that happened last year, right? Things that were working, creative that was working, landing pages that were working, it's a great time to revisit those and refresh those, right? That's the bottom line. Like things that worked last year, they can work this year, right? You just have to adjust it and make it fit. Let's pivot and talk about YouTube a little bit here. So I have good YouTube data, over here and back on this data. Things are going crazy on YouTube. Everyone's talking tons about shorts. Creators are bouncing all over the place. People are trying to crack into this and understand it as an ad platform, and then at the same time understand, do the same hooks, do the same sort of tone. Does it work on YouTube's short form, right? As it does on TikTok, or is YouTube Shorts going to be something else entirely? Is it closer to the kind of ads that we saw, on normal vanilla YouTube, right? What's going on YouTube? What are you seeing across clients?
Yeah, as we saw on the budget share, it's still a small percentage of budgets, right? And I know we're going to talk about industry a little bit later, but there's certain industries that are pushing into YouTube more than others. But on the whole, still only 2.5% of budget, right? So it's still small potatoes, but there are some brands where that's a much different story, right? We see some brands that are spending upwards of 40-50% of their budget there, and so we took a look at like talk to these brands, what's working for them, what they're seeing. I'd say it is really a lot of the same in terms of targeting strategies. You're not gonna win with targeting strategy alone on YouTube. I would still say what we're seeing work best is keeping your audiences consolidated. If you can find a good in-market audience that's really tailored to your brand and your vertical, that tends to work best. I've always seen, especially if you're a brand in like the keto space, keto audiences are going to work super well for you, right? And then similarly, if you have a specific vertical and you can find an in-market audience for those products, that's still what's working best. If you don't have that perfect fit where there's one audience that is really going to crush it for you, try to group together maybe multiple audiences. But targeting wise, that's really not where you're going to make a difference. What we're seeing work best is advertisers that are just investing in that creative strategy. Shorts is becoming a bigger part of the conversation, but we're still seeing a pretty small percentage of budget. I'm seeing generally like less, 10% or less than budget, but obviously that's a growing ad space. And as users of the platform become more accustomed to that space and seeing ads there, just like we saw with Instagram stories and TikTok, right? As a platform as a whole, what started off as as having very little ad inventory or no ad inventory, now it's become very normalized, right? We like wake up a year later and all of a sudden this is a very normalized behavior. So I'd say definitely be testing shorts, maybe start with retargeting or just a small budget in prospecting, but where you're still getting the best bang for your buck is a consolidated prospecting audience, is probably leveraging in market and heavy amount of creative testing. You can't really skimp on that on such a creative oriented platform like YouTube.
I think YouTube really set the standard for like those 3-second hooks, right? Just given the way that the skip button works there. When people we talk about creative testing, I think, would you agree that if you were going to test some creative, you were going to test, your creative strategy, that front loading your efforts there, really focusing on the hook, is probably going to get you the biggest return, right?
Yeah, it's not a platform where you can just borrow what's working on in other places. You need to think about what it's like with audio on as well. It's not just you can't just leverage a visually strong ad. You need to have a good audio experience. Something I've always seen work really well as well is don't rely on automatic captions. Put text overlay to mirror what you're getting, what you're saying on your audio. You're going to get better retention there. And then if people are low volume or, for some reason, volume off, even on YouTube, they'll at least see it. But generally, you're going to get best retention if they have audio on and you have the text overlays. And that also forces you to be really selective about the information that you're sharing in that first few seconds. You need to have it be very digestible, clear, and like you said, have a hook. You need to create intrigue, right? More than any other platform, individuals are forced to see the ad, but then given very quick optionality to skip. So you need to make them be interested and want to see the end to the storyline that you create in that first few seconds. There's
probably some tips and tricks to take from TV advertisers and on that front, I'm willing 100%. To guess. All right, let's chat about industry by industry breakdown.
Yeah,
we've had a ton of interest in this and requests for this data.
Yeah.
My question is, if you're a media buyer who is new, or you're somebody who's switching, let's say you've done a lot of beauty and you're switching over to apparel and fashion, right? And you're looking at this and you're going, wow, this is not what I expected to see. My number one question here is, what do you do with this data?
Yeah.
If you're receiving this and you're like, wow, that is not what I expected, either for myself or for some other industry, what do you do? What do you do with this?
Yeah, well, I'll say the first thing I wouldn't do is just try to mirror these percentages. These are averages, right? And so they're typical of, they encompass these brands as a whole, right? Each of these, we're only showing you the verticals that we have a large sample for. So each of these has at least 30 brands, some have more than 100. So these are all significant samples, but these are averages, right? And so a lot of brands, especially our growth brands, are going to still be very heavy on Facebook and Google. And so I would be aware about that, thinking about that. Obviously, we can see for all of these brands, the leading, or for all of these industries, leader is Facebook, second is Google. I'm pretty sure in basically every case. The thing that I would be looking at is, okay, for my specific vertical, where is there opportunity in emerging channels? Where does my vertical index highest on some of these smaller budget percentage, more high growth channels? So I'd be looking at, let's say we're in the health and wellness space. We're only seeing, or food and bev, these two verticals are seeing almost no budget percentage in Pinterest, which means brands aren't seeing success there. If we compare that to these other verticals, electronics is seeing as much as 1% of budget from Pinterest. So on the whole, 1% is still very small, right? But if you consider that 90% of these brands probably aren't testing Pinterest at all, it's a different story, right? Brands that are testing are probably much closer to about 10% of budget. And that's what I would be thinking about is, okay, for my vertical and let's go over to a place like Let's Talk Electronics for a second, seeing a lot of success on TikTok, right? 5.3%, which is significantly higher than the average for Northbeam customers as a whole. And so if you're an electronics brand that isn't testing TikTok, that would be a trigger for me to think, okay, let me start with maybe a small scale test, but I need to be testing this.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line, a lot of the conversations about channels that I've heard in the past have been, oh, well, our audience isn't there, right? Which I think is kind of a misnomer, because I'm like, well, if you're going to run this test and the results are coming back looking great, and wherever it may fit in the funnel, right, which you can actually track properly, in Northbeam, mandatory plug, then what's the point? Then I don't want to hear anything about like, oh, our audience isn't there. I'm like, but we're getting performance on the channel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's,
I think, okay, I was just gonna say 100% in line with that. That like you can see that almost every industry is having some success on each platform. It's not about if your audience is there. The audience is almost always there unless you're say selling unless you're selling something to like even 65 plus you can find on TikTok, right? There's really no boundaries on these platforms anymore, though there are skews. But if you appeal to most of the broad demographic cohorts in terms of age, then you're gonna see success everywhere, or you're gonna see your audience everywhere. It's more a matter of, can you creatively unlock the channel? Like I see on this that, for example, YouTube, for apparel brands, apparel is one of the lowest indexing on YouTube. And that's because when you think of trying to appeal and tell a really strong story that gives a hook and drives action, apparel is a tough industry to really drive that, right? The ad format on YouTube just doesn't lend itself well to clothing, as much as a disruptor in the electronic space, all right, or food and bev, where you can create more intrigue and there's more opportunity for differentiation. And those brands are seeing more success on traditional channels and plus TikTok, right? And so I would 100% agree with you, Brian. It's less about if your audience is there, it's more about, can I unlock this channel creatively?
Last thoughts. You just mentioned something about TikTok. A lot of chatter this week about the ban coming down. The CEO of TikTok is testifying in front of Congress, I believe, on Thursday. It's going to take a long time to put any kind of ban down, but as marketers, we're always trying to be up in front of everything that's happening. Your thoughts on the TikTok ban?
Yeah, I think for now, for brands that are seeing some success, you should continue to lean into it. It's very speculative. What's going to happen is, it's obviously not just out of all of our hands, but I think most likely going to drag on, right? And if I were a betting man, I would say that it's more likely that we're going to see regulation than just increased regulation than a full-on ban anytime soon. But that's obviously speculative. Those statements are not on behalf of Northbeam. That's just my personal opinion. But it's anybody's guess on what's going to happen. We have to do what's giving us the most profit today, right, as marketers. And so I would continue to lean into TikTok if it's a channel that is no longer an option for us a year from now. What you test and learn there will apply to the places that are replacing the channel, like the YouTube Shorts, like Instagram Reels. Those are places where a lot of that traffic within the US at least is going to redirect if there's a ban. So I would still think about, okay, at the worst, this is still a great testing ground for me to make sure I can, be successful in this ad format going into the future.
Amazing, good insight. Thank you, Tyler. That pretty much wraps up today's webinar. If you have any questions, please follow us and tweet at us northbeam.io on Twitter, or we're just Northbeam now. Follow us, tweet at us on Twitter. Please register for the next webinar. If you're registered for this one, you're registered for all of them. So keep an eye out on your calendars. We'll be doing this every week. So meet us here. We'll be covering everything. New data is going to keep coming. And we're going to have new guests all the time. So Tyler, thank you so much for joining today.
You got it.
And for anybody out there, if you have any more questions, please tweet at us and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.